Give about 2 more minutes. For the folks turning on your video, I really appreciate it. It makes it feel a lot less lonely to have some faces to look at, some people to see. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. The first question is the same question I ask every time. How are folks doing with the homework? Anybody get to the homework last night deploying the front end for their capstone? Anybody get to that and go, dear Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing? People feeling comfortable about it? I make everything seem easy, but I've been doing it for a long time. So you guys have to stop me and go, Nathan, it's not that easy. Slow down. Cool. Yeah, there's no rush. Again, the assignment is due on Sunday at midnight, so feel free to take as much time as you need. Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen. We are working off the slides again today. So, Karen, do you mind posting the slide link? Folks that might have lost it since yesterday, I'll share my screen. And
Okay, excuse me, Nathan, the one you shared today, is that going to be an updated one? Did you make some edits to the one from yesterday?
I did. I added some new steps. So we are going to start today from down on slide. Let's see. We're starting on slide 13.
Thanks.
So we finished deploying our front end. We got familiar with Heroku yesterday. We're going to keep working with Heroku today. We're going to deploy a backend. So today we're talking about the backend portion of the capstone. Some folks are using Postgres. Is that true? How many people in here are using Postgres for their backend? Can I get a reaction or something in chat? Okay. Good, lots of people, great, okay. So this is going to be the module for you. Because again, your Postgres, you've been running locally, I'm assuming, with brew. So you did a brew install of Postgres and your database lives on your computer, which is great for local development. But when we're about to put our code in front of customers, our database needs to be deployed as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about getting Postgres out there. And then finally, we're going to talk about front-end and back-end communication. So you have seen how when you're running your capstone locally, you're really just talking, if you have a back-end. When you're running your code locally, your front-end and your back-end talk to each other through localhost. So you make URLs, you form requests, and you send those to your computer, but on different ports. When we deploy all of our code, we need to change up how that communication is going because we don't have access to localhost. We're not running on a Mac anymore. So we're going to talk a little bit about the front end and back end communication once we have all these pieces up. All right. Any questions? Anything else before we dig into it today? All right. So we're going to deploy a backend. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to go log into Heroku. So your front end is going to be its own Heroku app. The backend is also going to be its own Heroku app. So let's go log into Heroku. We're going to work through an example. I'm going to provide the backend. If folks are feeling like I'm going too slow or they're feeling more advanced at this point, you could deploy your capstone backend and follow along with these instructions. That's up to you, but I'm going to provide a backend for folks that want to follow along with me, and we'll deploy that backend, see how that works. So let's create our Heroku app. Let's go to our Heroku.com, log into our dashboard, and then we'll go up here into the top right, click on new, hit create new app. So I'm going to make Nathan's web, let's call it Nathan's backend store. And for your app, give it your name. Don't take Nathan's backend store because I'm about to claim that on Heroku. So create a new app. This is what's going to hold the backend that we're about to deploy. All right. So once we have that Heroku app, let's move on. So I've got a backend already set up for you guys. So in your terminal, go somewhere to clone down this backend. I'll post this in chat. So go somewhere in your terminal and don't do this in your capstone. Do it somewhere outside of it, somewhere that you could throw this away later. And run this Git clone. So what we're doing is we're copying down from my repo the code that I have for this backend. And you can take a look at it if you want. We'll dive into it here in a second, but it's just a Node.js app with the Express that you guys have been working with.
Yeah, we're running this one as is. We're not changing your name out with ours.
When you're doing the clone, no. So you would go into your terminal and you would clone verbatim the link that I posted. I already have it, so I'm going to clear it from my. I'm going to clone it again. So Git clone takes one argument, and that is the URL to the GitHub repo that you're cloning. Should be able to hit enter, and it will say resolving deltas and all of that. So this is going to be the backend we use to deploy. So once you've cloned it, it creates a folder, same from yesterday. It creates a folder on your hard drive that contains the code, so you can CD into Nathan's backend store. That's the name. And then if you do an ls in there, you should see some files like server.js, app.js, all of that. So this is a Node.js app, just like you guys worked on, I think, with Max, writing your backend. Is everybody here? Can I get some thumbs up? Anybody having a problem cloning this down? Cordelia, are you good? Kyle?
I'm not there yet. It just took me a second to get into the right directory, so I'm just running the clone commands now.
Okay.
I see it, but am I supposed to be in it? I have it.
Yep, CD into it.
Okay, thanks.
Nathan, I have a quick question. This is Latonia.
Yep.
I already had the folder on my desk, and then I ran the clone command on desktop, ran the command, and now did it replace the folder I had before?
Why would you have it before?
Because I put it to my desktop last time when we were practicing with your store.
So this is the backend store. What we have been working with was the web store, which was the front end.
Yeah.
The backend store is different.
Why am I not seeing? I'm only seeing one folder. That's why I'm thinking it's the same folder. But it's here. It's okay. I'm in it. It's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Nathan. I created the app. It's Shaw backend.store. And I was able to clone that. But when I cd, it says command not found. And when I open the root folder, the home folder, it says Nathan's Backstore.
Yep, you should be in a folder called Nathan's Backend Store. Your app should have your name in it on Heroku. On your hard drive, you should be in a folder called Nathan's Backend Store.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you're in the right spot. You should just be downloading this code. So, all right. So this has valid code in it. So I'm going to open up my editor in this folder. You can open it up in yours, or you can just follow on my screen. I'm just going to quickly prove to you that this is just a normal Node.js app. So if you look inside of server.js, it has your typical Express deal. So you have this app.listen on a port, and I just have this function called create server that returns all of my Express routes. So if you go into app.js, ignore the stuff at the top. Here's where I'm defining my Express server. I'm adding a route to it and returning that. So should be familiar to you guys. This is all just the Node.js Express stuff that you guys have done previously. So that's all this is. It's a Node.js app. So if you guys have a Node.js app for your Capstone backend, you're in a good spot because that's what we're going to deploy. All right. So we are in Nathan's backend store, the folder. Now we're going to deploy it. So I'm going to jump back to the slides. So once you are inside of the folder Nathan's backend store, you're going to do that Heroku git remote command, which links up your code on your computer with the app that you want it to be uploaded to on Heroku. So you would say Heroku git :remote -a and pass in whatever the app name is that you created on Heroku. Mine is Nathan's backend store. So I'm going to just put in that. So one more time, this is the part where you would put in your name if you used your name to create your app. Then hit enter. Now the code in this repo is linked up with Heroku. Okay. For Node, when you're deploying a Node app to Heroku, Heroku asks you to provide a engine section in your package.json. What that means is if you open up the code with your text editor, and look inside the package.json, Heroku wants you to specify what version of Node to run your app with. I just chose 14.x because that's what Heroku suggested. If you have a particular version of Node that you want to run with, this is where you would enter it in, but you have to supply this block in your package.json. So later in the homework, when you're deploying your backend, don't forget to come in here and add this block to your package.json. Okay?
Hey, Nathan,
Yeah.
you might want to make your screen a little bit bigger. That's pretty tiny print for them to see.
Oh, thank you. And remember, package.json is valid JSON. So when you come in here into your capstone, you're going to see something like this. And remember the rules for JSON, you can't have a trailing comma on the last line of your JSON file. So don't let that error get you. Make sure to put a trailing comma here and then omit one there. Heroku will scream at you if you leave a comma in here. So if you get big warning marks when you try to deploy your backend, remember to just go through the slides and make sure that you follow the step. Okay. And then there's one more step before we can deploy. So when we have been working on our apps, our backend Node.js apps, what port have you all been using to start up?
I'm assuming 3000.
3000?
Yeah, I've been using 3000 in 2 or 4, but it's still in the same range.
Okay. So whatever port you pick for your app, if you write that number into your backend, like I did right here, it won't work. And the reason why is Heroku, when it spins up your backend, it's going to assign you a dynamic port. So if you hard code your app to only accept one port, or only run with one port rather, it's not going to work on Heroku. Heroku is going to take it when you deploy it, and it's going to go, I don't know how to talk to this app. Have you guys already covered what process.env means in Node?
No, never seen it.
Okay. So have you guys covered what environment variables are? Okay, cool. We're going to take a quick little detour here for a second. So let's run Nathan's backend store. To run our app, we would say node, and then I believe the server is, yeah, it's server.js. So to run this app, we would say node server.js. And if we hit enter, oh, don't forget to do an npm install. There are some packages to install after you've cloned down this repo. So make sure to do an npm install on your computer. And the npm install we're going to run inside of this Nathan's backend store because that's where the package.json that contains all the installation instructions, that's where that is. Okay. Once you run npm install, you can say node server.js. Right, this is wired to talk to the backend. Okay, so this app currently crashes. And the reason why is because it expects a database to be available. But when you run this app, before it crashes, notice how it says server running at HTTP localhost 3000. The reason why it's running on 3000 is because in server.js, we're testing to see if there is this magical port that we haven't yet explained. If that's not available, we're going to pick port 3000. Okay. This means read this setting, this port from the environment. Now, the way that you can set this variable right here is if you go into your terminal and before you run node server.js, back up all the way to the very beginning of it. and then put in port equals 4000. Blow that up a little bit more so it's easier to see.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? We've been running npx nodemon server.js.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't been doing it that way. I don't know if that makes a difference or.
Yeah, I believe nodemon does a lot of cool stuff, like it will automatically reload your files for you. I'm doing Node just because it's simpler.
Okay, so it
you
should
can
work
also,
that way on our computers as well. All right, thanks.
Yep. So before you call the command to run your server, you can pass it what are known as environment variables. And environment variables are key pair values. So port would be the key here, and the value would be 4000. And what that's doing is it's providing a variable from your terminal, this port equals 4000, just getting put into this box, this process.env.port. So this is an environment variable. You can specify it from here in the terminal, and you can change things about your app. So everything in process.env is coming from your terminal.
Okay, so I got a question.
Sure.
If you did like process.env, any variable name or something like that,
Mhm.
and you set the like, okay, like I don't know, like ID. So like let.
So let's just make a random environment variable called my name. Okay, if we run.
So before you run it, you have to like put down my name equals whatever. Okay.
My name equals Nathan. You can pass in multiple environment variables to your program. And to do that, all you would do is add an extra space and say my variable equals something. Okay. Now, if we run it, it's going to print out the contents of the my name variable. And also notice that the port has changed. Again, because what we're passing in through the terminal is getting mapped into this box right here. This box is special. So this process.env is a special, I don't know if module is the right word for it, but it's a special variable inside of Node where it will read things from the environment from where your code is being invoked, and you can consume that within your code.
Oh, okay. So like I assume that like if you don't import anything for port, it's going to return false, and then basically you just have if false and whatever it goes to 8,000. Okay, cool.
Exactly. So what this is saying is if you call this program with a port, if you want to pick a port, then sure, we'll use that port. If you don't supply a port through an environment variable, we're going to fall back to port 3000. Now, the reason why we need to do that is because Heroku doesn't let us run on whatever port we want. Heroku is going to pass us a port. It's going to assign one for us. And the way it's going to do that is through this environment variable. So in our app, when we deploy our Node.js backends to Heroku, we have to remember to take in the port and use it in our app. And the first argument to the express app.listen is the port. I'm assuming you guys have already been doing this. I don't think there's a way to call .listen without a port. So
the port in the top there, process.env.port, that needs to be all capital because that's how Heroku is gonna supply the variable.
Yep, exactly. In the documentation, they say for your Node.js app, we're going to pass you something with the uppercase P-O-R-T. That's exactly how it's spelled. We couldn't do something like this because in the documentation, they don't pass us a lowercase post. They pass us an uppercase.
And do you generally capitalize them? Is that just a convention so that you can tell that that's an environmental?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, good point. Yes, you would normally uppercase all of your variable names. Now, the contents of what goes into the variable can be lowercase. They can be strings, they can be numbers. Just like you see right here, port is a number. It can hold the value 4000. These are variables for you to be able to pass into your program. And we're going to need to look at this again because there are more things that we need to configure later. Other questions? Environment variables make sense to everybody?
Nathan, I have a question. This is Latonia. It's not on the environment variables though. It's
Okay.
a setback. So I went and found my folder and moved it to my desktop. And then I went into my package.json file so I can add in my engines. But you had already added it for us. You were just telling us that when we did our own, okay.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm doing the right stuff. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So don't forget, in your backend for your capstone, when you deploy your backend to Heroku, make sure you check for an environment variable that's defined, because Heroku is going to give you a port, and you're going to want to use that environment variable for the port to listen. Okay. So now we get to just deploy the app. This is pretty straightforward coming from what we did yesterday. So since you've already created your remote, you did that Heroku git remote. Since you already ran this command, your code is now linked with Heroku. So at this point, you could say you could say git push Heroku name. And it's going to kick off this big long deploy like you saw yesterday with the Create React app. It is shipping all of your code from your laptop up to the cloud, up to Heroku. Heroku's running npm install. It's running npm install, and that's really about it. It's about to start up the npm app, and it will give you this URL here and say that it's been deployed to Heroku. So compared to yesterday when we were doing the front end, this should be a bit simpler. There's a couple rules to follow. There's that environment variable to make sure that you're setting the port that your server runs on. There's the engines block inside the package.json. So there's a couple things, but you only need to do that once. After that, this is just like the front end. You're going to keep running the git push Heroku main every time you want to make a deploy. So the two should be fairly similar when you get done setting things up. Is everybody able to upload, do a deploy? Folks need more time? Got a thumbs up? Nice.
I got a cannot get, but I didn't actually do what you showed us because I thought I didn't have to because it says 3000 in mine and it's running on 3000.
Are you working on this example or are you trying to do your backend?
No, I'm using yours.
Okay. Yeah, you don't need to do anything with the code. It already has this check for the environment variable, so it's going to snag that from Heroku when it's deployed. Were you able to run the push Heroku main?
Yes, that was fine.
Cool. Okay. So now we've deployed our backend. So we can go ahead and click on the link. And it's going to throw an error because I don't have a / route on this backend. The backend, this backend has a / items. That's the one API endpoint it exposes. And spoiler alert, it's not going to work because it depends on Postgres. So we're going to have to jump into enabling Postgres for our backend. But you have something deployed, but it's breaking. So if you go to wherever it is that you deployed your code to and you go / items and hit enter, this is the one endpoint that this backend exposes. If you hit enter, it's going to sit there and spin. And then eventually it's going to pop up an error message. This is a good opportunity to show you folks what it looks like when your app blows up, because we are breaking this app. Okay. Application error. So if you went to /items, you should see this. This is what you get on Heroku if your app breaks, if something's not right. If there's a bug in your code, if your endpoint's returning 500, if Node.js just gives up and explodes, you will get something like this from Heroku. And it tells you to go look at the logs. So let's go to our dashboard and do what I showed everyone yesterday, which is when you get to your app, click on the More button and hit the View Logs. We're going to go see what the app is actually doing.
So I'm having a little bit of a problem with Chrome. Doesn't think it's a secure website. Your connection is not private and it's not letting me to the site.
Oh,
Did you try like hitting advance or something?
I didn't want to mess with the advanced features too much, but
Because like if you hit that, you might be able to bypass that.
can you share really quick? Because I don't think you're at the right place.
I'm supposed to brielles-backend-store.heroku.com/items.
Correct. Did you go to HTTPS in the URL?
Actually, I did not. Yes, no, it's there.
Okay.
So, no, it's not secure. So if I, let me switch around my video here. There's my warning.
What's the URL?
Oops. When I get
I can stop sharing so you can share your screen.
No, well, I'm on a different device, but
Oh, yeah, it's not
focus.
secure. So put a HTTPS at the beginning of that.
Well, no, but when I click on it to add it, it has a red line through it.
Yep, and then just hit enter.
Yes, and then nothing happens. Not secure still.
Is it spinning in the loading?
Nope.
No? Okay.
So
Well,
that's
well,
just me.
not an issue. It's just the app is broken. So that's kind of weird that it breaks in that way for you. But either way, you should be able to go to your dashboard for your backend app in Heroku and click on the More button and hit View Logs. If you go and view more logs, do you get something that looks sort of like this?
Wait, where exactly? I'm on the Heroku site. Where's View More Logs?
Under the More button,
Okay.
View Logs.
Yep. The actual More View Logs. So I have logs. Is there anything in particular I'm looking for? Which one?
Yeah, you're looking for
that section.
You're looking for parts of an error. This is
unhandled promise rejection warning.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. And you can trigger more logs to show up if you continue to hammer that /items. It will spit out more logs in here. I'm not sure why mine's not updating. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. So request timeout status 503. So this endpoint doesn't work, and the reason why is because it needs a database in order to work. Which leads us into the next part, which is going to be setting up Postgres. So for folks that have a Postgres instance for their capstone that are talking to a database, Heroku has a way of setting up Postgres. We're going to jump into that next. Okay. But before we do, we've gotten through the back end. Let's take a quick 10-minute break and come back at 6:20. Okay. Thank you, Karen. Susan, do you have a Postgres backend for your capstone?
Yes, I just started actually today. So I have it. It's there. The data's not right, but the tables are there and the Postgres. I'm actually meeting with Max this week to like make sure I have it right. Because I'm not sure about all my data types and I need images, I think. And that was a different thing he was going to talk to me about.
What are you storing in your database?
Not much. I mean, my website, my capstone is a festival, music festival. So
yeah.
So, I mean, obviously I could just populate the web page through the HTML myself, but this is a way to like learn a database. So, and then update as things come and go.
Yeah, I saw your capstone. I think when we were doing the last Monday, when everybody was showing their progress. Yeah, it looked really cool. Are you like a festival organizer?
No, I just like going, and I had moved here, and I don't know what's around here. And they were like, come up with an idea. And I was like, well, I guess that would be nice to know. So originally my first idea was map based, but that's kind of, I felt like it was way too advanced for me to sort of, figure that out step by step. Like it felt like it was jumping a few steps into making it location based right off the bat, without knowing any like HTML or CSS or anything. So, like now it's just, click the area and then it'll be a list as opposed to being looking at your phone and saying, you're here, this is what's nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And also because that was like, there was scope issues with that. Cause I was like, well, how would I have it show all the festivals in the area or only the ones that are active? Like that kind of thing,
Yeah, you'd have to go and like tap into some other database to go and get all of the known festivals. That'd be a big project.
Yeah, it seemed extremely complicated. But it's not like I've actually had another idea since that I want to explore maybe on my own after classes over. A different one. I was talking to somebody and I was like, I don't use Facebook really at all. I don't use Facebook at all. And I stopped using Instagram. And it's like, how do I get like music news? There's all these new venues I've never been because everything was closed. So I'm on these newsletters and it's like constant like information. And I know that there's ways you can like, I don't know all about it, but like scraping data, So I was thinking if there was a way to make a website where I was like, instead of me getting all these stupid newsletters, like pulling the info and it was like populating this website and saying, okay, here's what's at, I don't know, the landmark, here's what's at the place in Homer. You know what I mean? Like that would just be like what it would help me personally. And I think it'd probably help other people.
Yeah, dude, use Cypress. Get the robot to go and grab all that data. You can make the robot go and visit all the different places, whether it's like the newsletters or bands' websites or whatever. And you can get the robot to save all that data, shove it in your database, and then your website just spits out whatever's in the database.
Okay, I did not know that. That is,
dude, Cypress would be great for that.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, I like the idea of something else doing all the work for me. Like
the only tricky part would be like, say your favorite small band posts their updates only on their website, and you tell the Cypress robot to go to that one div on that one band's webpage and pull all the content from that div. So you tell the robot to do that, and then the band goes along and redesigns their website. Now all of a sudden the robot can't find it. That's the tricky part. You'd be
I mean,
juggling like
could you
maintaining all
put
those.
in I mean, maybe that would be a test or some kind of permanent thing could you put something in the code that will alert you if something did change or break? I mean, you could do that, right?
That's what Cypress is meant to do. Is it goes and it looks for things and then it throws an error if it can't find it. So that's what Cypress is traditionally used for. It just so happens that when it finds something, you can also save what it found, which would work well for you in terms of grabbing data. That's tricky though. That's real tricky. Tricky one. But it's a really cool idea. I'm the same way. I don't use social media, but I love having, like, it's unfortunate that most people use social media and like all the good stuff, whether it's like local deals or things like
So much.
that.
And I mean, I used to use Instagram and then it really kind of lost the thread for me because I wasn't an everyday user. And then they went from chronological, you know what I mean, to like the top. And it like lost its functionality to me. Like I only check once a week or once a month. And, you know, if I look on a Friday, I want to see like what's happening, you know, people are posting what's happening tomorrow, but kind of lost all that. So, and yeah, now I just have like newsletters and I check sites and it's like too much to manage.
Yeah.
So just having an app or a website do it for me.
You know, I've heard of different communities building like their own local community website. It's not on Facebook or any of those other things, but like they maintain a high quality local website. Like Washington has a bunch of them. There's like a bunch of good examples of that for people that don't want to use social media, so the community comes together and builds their own version of.
Brielle's app sounds like, I mean, when she said it, hers is going to be all local events and like not music, but like stuff to do around. And I'm like, make it because I moved to Syracuse and I'm looking on syracuse.com, which is like not great. And
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the way to go. Those websites are cool.
Yeah, it's nice. It's helpful.
Brandy, are you here?
Yeah.
That is not ethical. I am not going to take accountability for teaching you how to scalp fresh sneakers before everybody else.
No, I met somebody who was able to do it, and I thought of it. I'm like, maybe not. But now that I know that, maybe not.
I've had guilty thoughts of using Cypress for my local Craigslist. Like if I need something, just like putting it into a search list or something and having Cypress go and like alert me. Great power, great responsibility. Those
Sheesh, so
captchas,
much potential.
dude, those captchas are gonna get you though. The like, what is the really popular sneaker one? Is it like In Stock or something, or Stock X? Yeah, Stock X. Have you seen this website before?
Yeah, but I figured
Yeah.
like they have bots. The person that I met, they were able to get past them. So I figured like bots on bots, why not?
Mm, I mean, that stuff gets really advanced because so websites can tell when you are using Cypress because Cypress reports what's known as a user agent. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, briefly.
Yeah. Yeah. So Cypress has like almost like you can think of it like a fingerprint. So when like StockX, for example, when you connect to it with your robot, they're going to see that you're coming from Cypress unless you do some pretty nasty stuff to erase that fingerprint. Um, I'll bet you good money that that's what your friend's doing.
Better them than me.
Yeah, that's what you should do. You just be the consultant, charge like a consultant fee, and let them risk getting caught.
Ah, risk management.
Dude, is the PS5 still hard to get? That's a cool watch.
Small thing. I don't know if we can have this up during recording. I could be wrong.
StockX?
Yeah, can we have like websites shown during recording?
Oh, it's on the public internet. You can't copyright strike me.
Ah.
Now, if I start playing some music in the background, then we'll instantly get kicked. I feel like I need to give an advertisement for Skillshare since we're on YouTube. Skillshare and Squarespace. Ooh, could you use Cypress as a demo for users? I don't know. Cypress feels a little bit too technical to try to use it. So there are products that will do that. Like you can set up. I don't know the names offhand, but you know how when you create an account, usually it'll force you into like this tutorial on how to use the website, and like it'll gray out parts and it'll highlight others. Yeah, that feels like something that would be better suited for making a demo of how to use your app. You can with Cypress, you can tell Cypress when it runs to record a video, which could be useful for creating demos, but it kind of seems like overkill. Like if you wanted to record how to use your website, you might just make a video yourself instead of coding out all the instructions for it. Cypress is cool for testing. Like it's really good at doing automated tests. Okay. So we've got the backend up. And it's not working. It has an items endpoint that does not work. And the reason why, we go and open up our text editor and look inside the backend store. The reason why is because it's trying to return this value from the function get items. And what get items is doing is it's doing a direct DB query. So it's selecting all from some table called items. That doesn't work because we have no Postgres. The Postgres we did have was on our Mac. We were using our local Mac and our local Postgres instance to do testing and to build this app out. But now that it's deployed and it's running on Heroku, it doesn't have a way to get back to our Mac. It has no way to touch our local Postgres. Heroku makes this really, really easy. So if your backend needs Postgres, go to whatever your app is and add the Postgres add-on. So I'm in my app. I'm going to go down to resources, the tab resources. Start typing out Postgres, and you'll see Heroku Postgres. That's the add-on that we want. So go into your backend app in Heroku and click that add-on. It will, holy moly, they will gladly take $16,000 from you if you so choose. But instead, we're going to do the hobby dev / free Postgres instance. Holy moly, $16,000. And then click the submit order form. Now what's happening behind the scenes is Postgres is actually using Amazon Web Services. It's spinning up a database over there, and they're linking it up to your app. So they're effectively reselling AWS. But now we have a Postgres instance hooked up to our backend. The question is, how do we get our app to talk to it? And this goes back to environment variables. So when you add on the Postgres product to your Heroku app, what Heroku will do is it will give you another environment variable. This time, the environment variable is called database_URL. And this is the login information you need in order to reach the Postgres that Heroku has provisioned for you. And I added a link here for the Heroku documentation. Check that out if you're needing to do something more complex. But what I've got here for code will hopefully do the trick. So let's go into our code and look at app.js. So up here at the top on line 6 in app.js, again, we're doing a test. We're going to see if Heroku is passing us a database URL. So we're checking to see if that environment variable is supplied. And if so, we're going to use this special syntax to construct our database client. And we're going to pass in this database URL into the connection string. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to wire up our client just like you folks have been doing in order to talk to your local Postgres instance. So this is the kind of code that you're going to need to add to your capstone, because your app now not only needs to run locally on your Mac and be able to test against your local Postgres instance, but it also needs to handle environment variables coming in from Heroku and talking to the Heroku Postgres. Okay. So now that we have that enabled, our backend store should work. So we can go to open the app, /items, and you should get an empty array. So items is this empty list. Is everybody able to get this? Kyle, what are you getting?
I still have an error. I just hit reload because I had never closed the application error thing, and I'm not getting any change.
Do you want to share your screen really quick? It could be that Postgres is taking a little while to stand up too.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. What window do you want me to share? The
Heroku window.
Okay.
So you've got it attached as a database. Cool. Go ahead and click the Open App button up in the top right next to the more. Yep. Click that.
Oh, yeah.
And then / items. That is the endpoint.
Yeah, it's the same as I had over on the other tab.
Oh, okay. Let's do a little bit of debugging here. So we've got something going wrong with the app. So if you click back into the Heroku, click back into there and then go to more. Let's hit view logs. And let's see what's going on. So app crashed, still 503. So this is your web store backend. Real quick, can you pull open the code that you have for the backend store?
Yeah, your code. Yeah, hold on. Just gonna make it smaller so it fits on the screen.
Okay, this looks good. Can you go back to the server.js? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't touched anything on it.
Yeah, this all looks right. So if you ever run into a situation where you've looked at the logs, they don't make sense, and you kind of have no idea what's going on, one thing you can do is redeploy your app. And sometimes that will fix things because maybe it's the fact that it still can't find Postgres. So let's go into the terminal. Yep, exactly. And let's run the push to main again.
I don't remember is it just
Git push Heroku main. Everything is up to date. So there's no changes in your app. So Heroku's going, okay, there's no difference. I don't need to deploy. So let's make a small change and then let's push. In order to do that, just add like a new line between 8 and 10 or something. Yep. Okay, save. And then let's go and make a commit. So commit your changes, say git commit -am.
Testing.
Yep. That works for me.
Okay.
Hit enter. So that's created a little bundle on your computer. Let's push that up to Heroku. So let's do git push again. Cool. All right. We will come back to this.
Yeah.
And hopefully after this is done, your items endpoint will work.
Okay, do you want me to stop share?
Wait, is it done?
It's getting there, yeah. I don't know how long.
There we go. Cool. That was
Okay.
quick. All right, let's check the endpoint and see.
So go back to,
Mhm.
let's see, open app. No.
So go to / items.
Oh, right. No.
Can you go back to logs really quick? And let's just see. Heroku router app crashed. So here where it's saying Heroku router, it makes me think that it hasn't even stood up the Node.js app. So go back over to resources, the resources tab.
Mm-hmm.
It says npm start. Why does it say npm start? Let's look. Okay. Click on the activity tab. Let's make sure that it got a. Okay. So it deployed a minute ago. Let's go to settings.
You did.
And then scroll down. Should show a build pack of, yep, has a build pack for Node.js. Okay.
Oh, here, yes.
Yep. So it detected that you have a Node.js app. This should just work. Go back up to the top. Let's try just opening it one more time and see if it just takes a second for it to. Heroku app, okay. Yeah, the only thing I could think of is the port, and you didn't change anything with the port inside of your code. So go back to your text editor. Yeah, so process.m.port. So it's looking up the port, and if it has one, you're binding to it. I'm not sure. Let's come back to this later. And I'll try to, is anybody else hitting the same issue, or is anybody else able to get items? Anybody getting an issue showing the items? Yep, you should get an empty array. Yep, empty array and items. Hey, Kyle, while we're moving forward a little bit, try creating another app, and just for fun, no, that's going to take a little bit of work. Yeah, we'll come back to it here in a sec. Okay. Just let me go back to share my screen. All right. So when you're doing your homework, when you're getting your backstone or your capstone pushed up to Heroku, don't forget to connect to your Postgres instance using this special database URL variable. That's about all there is to that. Okay, everybody should be able to do this. So here are some helpful tips for working with Postgres, because I know it's going to be a little bit different because the Postgres isn't on your computer. It's a Postgres that's living up in the cloud in Heroku. So here's a couple tips. The first tip I have for you is make sure that when your app stands up, when your backend stands up, make sure that it always checks to see if the tables have been defined. Because if your app gets pushed to Heroku and it expects tables to already be there, and you just launched a brand new Postgres that has nothing in it, your app's going to crash. So make sure that the first thing that your app does when it stands up is it checks to see if those tables exist. And I'll give you an example of that. So here in myapp.js, I have a function that creates a table if it doesn't exist. Have you guys seen this if not exist syntax before? So this is exactly the same as create table. You guys have seen create table, right? So it's the exact same thing, except if you add on the if not exists, you can rerun this command as many times as you want. And if the table already exists, cool, it won't do anything. If it doesn't exist, it will create the table. What this lets me do is put this function at the startup of my app, which means that if my app is getting created for the very first time on Heroku with the Postgres that has nothing in it, my app will go and provision the tables, and then it will start up with standing up the rest of the app. Does that make sense? Yes, if you delete the table, then it will create one because the table will not exist. Therefore, this will trigger. Now, if you didn't put the if not exists, if you just said create table items, if you put that at the start up of your app where your code first begins to run, if you put that there and the table already existed, it's going to throw an error. And depending on whether you caught it or not, it might crash your app. So instead of doing a create table, we use if not exists because that will not throw an error if the table exists. And if it doesn't, it'll go ahead and create the table for you. Okay, so that's my first piece of advice for you, is when you are writing your code that talks to the database, make sure you check and handle the case of the database is brand new because you just stood it up on Heroku, nothing's in there. Make sure you handle that situation. Okay. Now, if you're working locally, I'm not sure how you guys have been working with Postgres. Have you guys been using a UI, or have you talked about how to use the command line interface to work with the database? So if I do something like pSQL in the terminal, you've been using Beekeeper. Okay. You've been using Beekeeper. What is Beekeeper? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to show you how to use Beekeeper with this. So you've been using Beekeeper in order to connect to your local database, which is helpful. Let's see, select a connection type. We're going to make it talk to Postgres. I'm going to have it talk to my localhost 5432. The user is Nathan Evans. Let's test. Database Nathan Evans doesn't exist. That's because we have a database called items. Let's test that. No. Postgres. There we go. Okay. So this is Beekeeper. I've never seen it before, but this looks like it's just a viewer for your local database, which is cool. Oh, yeah, so here's my database for my app. I have a database called Store, and in it, I have some items. So this is my table for items. How do you folks insert things into your, do you use the query console to do it? So you would say something like insert, okay. So before I start inserting things, let me show you what my table looks like. So it's just a name and a price. So if you guys recall from the web store, it was a bunch of cards for different things you could buy on that web store. And each item had two values. It had a name and a price. Instead of the front end just having that all hard coded in JavaScript, I've moved it into the database. This is the table for that. So you see we have this items table with a name and a price. So I'm going to go ahead and insert some values. So insert into my table items values. You guys don't need to be doing this at all. I'm just doing it for my local computer, and then I'm going to show you how to do the same thing for Heroku. So I'm going to insert into my local database some items, values. So the name is like, what do we want to call this? Let's put some shoes on the store, and they're $100. Column shoes does not exist. Insert into items, values. Oh, it needs to be single quotes, not double. There we go. Now if I go and look at this, there we go. We have a shoes, blow this up. We have a row with shoes and price 100. So this is in my local database. And again, you guys don't need to be running this. I just want to show you how this works. So if I do port equals 4000 and then I say node server.js, that's going to spin up my database, and my database takes in some arguments to connect to my local database. So if we're not providing this Heroku database URL, we fall into this else clause. This else clause is looking for some environment variables so it can talk to a database. So I need to give it a database user, a name, a password, and a host. So let's take database user is whatever my local Postgres user, which is Nathan Evans. The database name is store, I think. Password, that's just blank, so I'm not going to supply an environment variable for that. And then the host is localhost. So these are all my environment variables that I'm going to try to pass into this app. So now I'm going to just say node server.js. So all of these things are going to get shoved into there. Now it's running on my computer. And if I open up localhost items, there we go. So items is now returning one item, some shoes that are selling for $100. So that's great. I can do my local testing. I can work on my backend. I can develop my code. I can add new features, whatever. Now let's talk about how we would insert some items into the Postgres database. Here we go. So this command right here, Heroku pg psql-a, this was what I was going to show. So if you say Heroku, yeah, this right here. If you say Heroku pg psql, if you run this command and then pass it the name of your app, so my app is Nathan's Backend Store. So Nathan's Backend Store is where I'm going to pass in. If you say this, what Heroku will do is it will give you a direct database connection to your Postgres instance. So this prompt that you get right here is essentially what you get when you go here into the query panel in Beekeeper. So when you're running this stuff in Beekeeper, really all Beekeeper is doing for you is it's taking what you enter into this window right here, and it's shoving it through what I just launched in the terminal. This is the command line for Postgres. So if you're comfortable with using this, you could work with this directly. So we can do the same thing here. So if we want to insert some items like shoes into our database, just paste it and hit enter. Again, this is just Beekeeper, but in a much more raw form. So go ahead and run this Heroku pg:/p-SQL and then insert, I'll paste this into chat so you don't have to. Okay, and if you've done it correctly, what you should be able to do is go here into the backend store, open up the app, go to /items. And now your backend deployed on Heroku, because it's talking to the Postgres on Heroku, now it should return an item inside the list. Should look something like this. And we can do more inserts if we want. We can insert, let's say, a TV we're selling for $1,000. We can insert some, only if you added that item, right? And you can add whatever items you want. This is just an example. So I added a TV for $1,000. I'm going to add a watch for $10.
Did we, Nathan, this is Latonia. Did we need to do the steps that you did from before you added the shoes? So I was trying to keep up with my notes, so I wasn't actually doing it. But I'm getting a connection, connecting to Postgres SQL closed.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Okay,
that-
so when you run this command,
Mhm.
your Heroku PGP SQL, it's not pulling up a little prompt like here.
No.
You share,
Well,
let me stop and you share your screen. Show us
no,
what
I
you're
think it is. I think it is. I think, hold on a second.
Shaw, when that isn't an error, that's yeah. See, so Latonia, you're actually in Postgres right now.
Okay,
So
so
if
it
you
is
click-
working.
Yep, if you click and do a select star from items, or sorry, from store. Store is the name of the table.
Mhm.
So it's not store, it's items. I was right the first time. There we
And
go. Then a semicolon. So hit a semicolon
Oh, okay.
right there. No, you're fine. Just back up and type in
I tried to
semicolon.
back up and it made that little popping sound. You hear it?
Yeah, it's fine. Just go ahead and hit a semicolon
Oh,
and hit enter.
oh.
There you go. So you don't have anything in your
It's
items.
empty, but yeah, I can see
Yep.
the name and the price. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Shaw, did that answer your question? You should have gotten to a terminal. Were you able to?
So yeah, it says connecting.
Do you want to share your screen?
Sure. So,
Oh, it started connecting and then it stopped. Hit Control C to get out of this. There we go. Now try running that Heroku PGP SQL command again. And it's only supposed to do that for a second, and then it's supposed to drop you into a prompt. Go to over in your dashboard in Heroku, click on resources, the resources tab. Let's see. Yeah, you've got a Heroku Postgres there, and it's the hobby and dev edition. Yeah, see, this is one of the things with Heroku. When you use their free stuff, it will, they don't really give you the best. So I'm wondering if they've just given you a corrupt database instance. Let's see, what can we do about that?
the log helps. No, nothing new. Let's see what we can do here.
So Nathan, if we want our capstone websites to be continuing usable websites, we should probably pay for the service. Is that the moral of the story?
Yeah, and I'm almost rethinking whether we should have even started using Heroku, because like Kyle's not able to hit the items endpoint, and I'm wondering if that's because we're using the free tier. Yeah, I would definitely recommend paying the $7, especially if you're going to use this long term. But this is interesting because you're not able to dial AWS, And I'm wondering if it's something with your network. Do you have, Shaw, do you have anything weird with your router, like firewall or?
No.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to give you a command to run in 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
In your terminal, do an nc-v
Sorry, dash V.
-v, right? Let me send you this in chat. So I put it in the Slack chat. So nc-v, and then I put it in the Zoom chat. If you go in Zoom,
Minimize this. I lost the Zoom chat.
paste all of that after the nc-v.
Chat. So it's all the way there.
For the rest of class, has anybody shown you what the nc command does? This is the DevOps module, so I'm going to just share these tidbits with you. Yep, go ahead and hit enter. Okay, yeah, this is a networking related issue, so hit Control-C. So NC is, it's Netcat. And I believe for the module with Ryan, you guys use Netcat to send data back and forth. NC can also be used to test connections. So if you pass NC a host name and then a port, NC will test to see if you can reach that port. And if you can't reach that port, it's something related to networking. Shaw, did you have problems when you were doing Netcat with Ryan?
I don't remember.
Okay. I'm gonna have to, Shaw, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research to see how to get you access to that Postgres database. So I will follow up with you after class.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that's how you can connect to Postgres. If you want to connect Beekeeper to it, it's going to be a little bit involved, but I will show you. I will show folks that want to keep using Beekeeper how to do it. Okay. So if you really, really like Beekeeper, I'm going to add this to the slides, but I'll also post it here in chat.
Nathan, this is Susan. Can I ask a quick question? I can't get out of the terminal where the database Control-C doesn't work.
\Q.
Backslash. No.
Nothing. Say exit and hit enter.
Oh, I did the wrong \. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, if you run that command to talk to Postgres, so this Heroku PG pSQL command, if you run this and it drops you into the Postgres terminal to get out, I believe it's a \C. Yep, it's a \C to exit from Postgres. Good question. Okay. If you really, really want to use Beekeeper though to talk to your database, and for some reason you don't like using the command line, you can totally use Beekeeper. And here's the command to do it. So if you call Heroku PG credentials URL -A and then pass your backend app name, let me blow this up a little bit. So if you run this command, it's going to spit out a whole bunch of stuff at you. And this is all of the raw connection details for reaching your Postgres instance. And in here, you can see a couple of things, specifically down here on the connection info string. The first one is the host. So you will go into Beekeeper and create a new connection. Let's see, how do you create a new connection in Beekeeper? Oh, down here at the bottom, where you're connected to your local host, your Max Postgres, hit disconnect. And then we're going to go and set up a new connection type. So click on Postgres. So we got to fill out some stuff here from the connection string that got spit out here. So we're going to take the host and we're going to copy paste that into this. The port is 5432, so we don't need to change that. Your user, password, your host, all that's going to be different. So grab what pertains to you. So I'm grabbing my user here and pasting that in. I'm grabbing my password, pasting that in. And then for the default database, use the DB name that you get from Heroku and paste that in. This should work. Let me just double check here. So we have the host set, we have the user set, we have the password. Error establishing connection.
What about that enable SSL button? Do you have to turn that on?
Oh, enable SSL. Let's try turning that on and see. I put my database name back in. Good call. Very nice. Yes. And that should have been obvious because it has in the connection info string, it has SSL mode is required. Very good catch. So yeah, make sure that you have the SSL enabled. So if you really want to use Beekeeper, here's how you do it. And then I can hit connect. It's going to load all the stuff. Now I can see the items table that exists out on Heroku. Questions, people having trouble doing this that wanted to use Beekeeper?
I don't, this is Latonia. I don't have a specific question, but when you get a chance, can you just run through the steps again? Just to
Yeah,
clean
absolutely.
again? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you really want to use Beekeeper in order to access your Heroku database, the command you want to run is this Heroku PG credentials URL -A. All of our Heroku commands we run, they take a -A to specify what the application is. So it's the same thing here. So you would call this PG credentials URL -A with your app name. When you hit enter, it's going to spit out a whole bunch of stuff. Don't share this info with anybody. I realize that my stuff is getting streamed to YouTube and people could log into my database. We'll fix that here in a second, but either way, run this command, and it'll spit out all of your database details. Then you're going to need to go and take the details and plug them into Beekeeper. So you'd open up Beekeeper, go to create a new connection. You pick Postgres because we're using Postgres here. And then you just start filling things in. So for the host box, we'll go into our string here and find where it says host. Here's host. This host equals part right here. We're going to snag that. Go back into Beekeeper. Plug in the host. Okay. Then we'll grab the port. The port is 5432. Port's 5432, so we're good there. Then the user box. We'll grab the part of the connection string that specifies the user, so this right here. And we'll go into the password. The password is this big long thing right here. So we'll grab that password, throw it in. For the default database, we'll take this DB name right here. DB name and default databases are synonymous. We'll plug that in. And then as Kyle pointed out, we'll turn on the enable SSL. And I will save a screenshot of this, and I will upload that to the slides for you later tonight. For folks that want to use Beekeeper, Beekeeper is pretty nice for being able to visualize what's in that table. So I could see how Beekeeper would be pretty handy. But if you just need a query console to be able to run commands, I would encourage you to practice using the Postgres terminal, just because it's a good thing as programmers to know. You might run into this is the Devops module, so you might run into a situation where you need to fix something quickly and you don't have time to download Beekeeper and time to do some of that stuff. So being able to work and use the Postgres CLI is handy. Other questions, thoughts? People having problems getting Beekeeper set up, people having problems connecting to their Postgres instance. Okay. So that was tip number 2. Tip number 3. What if you accidentally share your secret DB credentials? So what I was just talking about, all this stuff, say that you're giving a presentation at a Careers in Code and all of a sudden you just live streamed your DB credentials. And now everybody that's watching can quickly go to their terminal and log into your database and inject all kinds of nasty things into your database. Well, if that happens, you can run credentials rotate, which makes Heroku reject all of the old credentials and recycle them for brand new ones. And the way it does it is pretty cool. So we can run this in our terminal. In fact, if everybody else wants to follow along, you can rotate your credentials as well. So Heroku PG credentials rotate -A, and of course we'll put in our app name. And it'll spit out a big warning message telling you, watch out. Here, let me actually paste this into chat so you guys all have this. Okay. It'll spit out a big warning message saying, warning, you're about to rotate your credentials. Just so you know, when you do this, it's going to take down your app for a brief period of time because Postgres is recycling, so your app's not going to have access to the database. So if you go ahead and type in whatever it asks you to type in this case, it's our app name, and hit enter, it will rotate the app credentials. So now the username and password have changed for my Postgres instance. If I wanted to get them, I could go ahead and rerun the PG credentials, and I could go update my Beekeeper to use the new username and password. Our app is fine because our app gets handed that environment variable for the database. This right here, this database URL. So our app is fine when we rotated those credentials because this environment variable was updated by Heroku. So we don't need to do anything for our app, but if we were connected to the Postgres instance, we would need to update our Beekeeper. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have questions about rotating their credentials? This is also really handy if you accidentally paste it into Slack. I know I've done that before at work where I've needed the password for something, and then all of a sudden I accidentally pasted it into Slack, and then I need to go and rotate credentials because it's no longer secure. Any other questions? Okay. Let's talk about what happens if you accidentally delete your database. So I don't know if in class you guys went over the drop table command, but if you get into Postgres and you get going and you accidentally drop your database, you can run into a situation where you've just lost all of your data, and that's a big problem. So the way Heroku addresses that is if you follow this link, there is a command here, and I'm not going to go through it, but I would encourage folks that have a capstone with very important database data, I would encourage you to go through this link and check it out. You can set up a schedule for your database to be backed up. With the free tier, you get two copies of your database, and if you keep getting more snapshots, it'll kick out any old ones. So you'll always have at least two most recent snapshots, two backups of your database. So with Heroku, you could schedule those backups. And if you run into a situation where your database gets completely trashed, you're destroyed, you'll be glad that you set this up, because then you can just restore from a snapshot. But I will leave this to you guys. Feel free to check this out if you want to go the extra mile and make sure that you have a database recovery plan. I would strongly recommend it. But if you're like
What
me
tab?
and all you're doing, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to know what tab. Where was that link?
This is in the slides. I will also post it in the chat.
Oh, I thought it was on the Heroku page. Okay.
Okay. So that's it for Postgres. Any other questions about the Postgres, the backend stuff we've covered so far?
This is Latonia. I have a couple random questions. Then when you put in the EC2 dash, whatever that was, what was that about again? What is that for?
That is
Do you
just the
remember what I'm
host.
talking about?
Yep. So if we go back, I can share these because I rotated my credentials to my database, and you guys can see these old database credentials. So this EC2, this whole thing right here, this was what I was talking about reselling. Heroku is actually reselling AWS behind the scenes. So you can see this is AmazonAWS.com. All this is this is an address to get to the database. So Heroku, when it creates your Postgres instance, it's going to give you a URL to be able to reach it. This is the same sort of thing as when you were developing on Postgres locally. You would pass in either 0.0.0.0 in order to reach your local computer's Postgres, or you would pass in localhost. That's the same host name. Does that make sense? And like I said, Heroku is just reselling Amazon behind the scenes. So if you go and create another Postgres instance for another one of your backends, you'll get a different string. Everybody should get a different string. I don't think anybody will get the same string as me, but other questions? We've covered a lot. We covered backend and Postgres. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the different scenarios that we have just unlocked. So the first scenario, local front end to local backend. This is what you guys have been doing all the previous modules that you've been working. You've been running npm start, and then on your backend, you've been running nodemon to start up your Node.js server. So this is what you guys are used to. You're running both of your apps on your local machine. But because we've deployed things, we now have a couple of different scenarios. So when you're doing development, you can also have this scenario where your front end is deployed to Heroku and your back end is deployed to Heroku, and now you need both of those to talk to each other. So we're going to look at how to make that communication between both of those apps work. There's also another scenario where you could be locally developing on your front end, but instead of running your node server locally, maybe you run against the node server that's deployed on Heroku. So because you've deployed some of these pieces, you now have these different scenarios that you can develop in. And same for the vice versa. You could have a deployed front end and want to test your local node server. So you could wire your front end to talk to your local machine's node server. And we'll dive in a little bit deeper about how each of these work. Okay, so let's talk about how we could make our front end deployed on Heroku talk to our back end deployed on Heroku. The tricky part about this is getting the front end to know where the back end is. Because when you were writing your front end code, you were saying, okay, the browser is going to request resources from the backend, and the backend lives at localhost 3000, right? Or localhost 4000, or wherever you're running your node server. Well, that's no longer true when it's deployed on Heroku, because it's no longer running on your computer, so it's no longer localhost. So we're going to look at a way to read in an environment variable in the front end that tells it where to find the backend. So to do this, I'm going to drive. Don't feel like you need to follow along. I'm just going to show you how to do this with my front end. But these are going to be the same steps that you'll want to perform for your capstone. So the slides will have most of the content here. And the gist is that we need to import this library in order to grab an environment variable that tells the front end where to find the back end. Okay, so I'm going to close some of my windows real quick. So I'm going into my front end folder, and I'm going to open it up in my IDE. Eventually it'll open. There we go. Ah, this folder is empty. Okay. I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to clone down the front end again. Nathan's web store, so not the back end. Okay. Then I'm going to go into the front end code. My text editor is fighting me a little bit. Man. Try this. Sorry about this. My web storm is just being real picky right now. Here we go. Okay. Front end code. Does this look familiar to people from the homework? All right. So we've got a proper backend now for Nathan's capstone, for Nathan's web store. So we don't need any of these items because we're going to start loading them dynamically from the backend. So I'm going to, when the app first mounts, we need some items and we need set items. We're going to use state. It's going to be an empty list. So we're going to go and fetch some items from the backend and we're going to put it into a piece of React state. And then for folks that haven't seen it before, useEffect is a React function that allows you to call a function when something inside of your component changes. You would pass in the things that you're watching into this array right here. Have you guys covered useEffect already? Okay, so I'm okay. So you guys know what I'm doing. All right. useEffect, if you pass nothing, it's just going to fire once when the app first is rendered. So what I'm going to make it do is I'm going to make it do an Axios get on my backend. So it's going to go and load these items from my backend store. And then it returns a response. And then with the response, you return the data. And the data is this items object. So I'm going to return response.data.items. This needs to be an await because this returns a promise. And we'll call what it returns just data for now. And we need to mark this as async so we can use the await keyword. So this is going to go hit my API, grab the items, and then return those items. We'll store it into data. Then we can call set items with our data. That will become our new items. Instead of that big hard-coded list of items that you saw from all of the homework, now we're going to fetch it dynamically from the database. So whatever we just put into Postgres, that's what we should get back. npm start, npm install because I need my node modules. I'll bring this down one line so this looks a little cleaner. I need to install Axios as well because I don't have Axios installed in this project. How would I install Axios? Okay. So if you want to install it through, yep, you would need an import statement. I'm talking a little bit before that when you want to download the library so that you can use it in your code. If you want to download a library, you say npm install and then the name of that package. And then if you want to save it, you can pass it the -s or the --save argument. And that will go and find it on the internet and download it into your node modules folder. So now I can do that import. Just checking really quick to make sure. Yep, so we have Axios installed. It's part of our dependencies in the package.json right here. There we go. So now we can do our import statement and pull Axios into our code. All right. Let's go ahead and start the app. Cool. So this is the data coming from our backend that's deployed on Heroku. So you can see we've got shoes $100, TV $1,000, watch $10. If I open up another terminal and I run that Heroku command, Heroku PGP SQL to get access to the Postgres database, I can go in and do an insert statement. So insert into items, values, glasses for $5. And then refresh this. Now our front end has the glasses being displayed here as well. Okay. So our back end is making an Axios call to the API on Heroku, the items endpoint. Items is going to Postgres, it's getting some stuff and it's returning it. This works for testing our backend. So if we deploy this code now up to Heroku, this code is also going to reach that backend. So this front end now talks to this app. But what about local development? What if I wanted to run my node server locally and I didn't want to necessarily test against the deployed version of my backend? We could change this to be HTTP localhost 3000. So now it's targeting my local node server. We could do that. But there's a better way of doing this. So in the slides, I have a link to a library that Heroku provides called the runtime env library. And what this will do is it will read environment variables into your front end app. So what we can do is install this library. So go into our project and run npm install save this library. Okay. And now we can import the runtime env library. So we could say const env equals runtime env. Okay. And then we'll use that environment variable to make our request to the backend. So this environment variable is similar to what we did with Node.js, where we're going to let something provide the location, provide the value of this environment variable so we can make our connection to the backend. But where does this environment variable come from? The answer is in Heroku. If you go to your front end app in Heroku, you can specify environment variables in your front end app. So I'm going to make a front end really quick. We'll call it Nathan's Web Store. If you go to the settings page, you'll see there's a box right here called reveal config vars. This is where you could set environment variables in your front end. So what we could do is we can enter in an environment variable that our front end app can read. So we could tell it what backend the front end should talk to. Does that make sense? I'm moving a little fast here. Is everybody following along with this? Okay, so let's go back here. So the key, the name of the environment variable is React app backend URL. The React app part, this needs to be set. So when you name a front end environment variable, you can't just do an env.backend URL. It needs to be prefixed with the word React app. So we'll take this, we'll go into Heroku, into the front end, and we'll add an environment variable here. So what should the value for our backend URL in Heroku be? Let's go back to the code here. So the front end is making a request to go and get some data. What is the URL that the front end should be talking to in order to fetch items? Right, it's the backend URL. This is the front end. This is the JavaScript on the front end reaching out to the back end to get the items to render in all of those cards. So it would be the backend URL. What is our backend URL? It's the URL to our items. So this right here. This Nathan's backend store.heroku app. So we'll take that and go plug it in here. Hit add. All right. So now when my front end is running on Heroku, anywhere in code where it has the word React app backend URL, it's going to replace it with this string. Which means this is going to get replaced with that when it's running on Heroku.
And we could do this with any keywords?
Absolutely.
Theoretically?
The only rule is if you're making an environment variable in the front end, you have to prefix your environment variable name with React _ app _. Okay. Now, when the code gets deployed onto Heroku, Heroku is going to pass in this environment variable. That's going to tell the front end when it's deployed on Heroku how to reach the back end, where it's at. So this variable is going to have some context. Running locally, though, so let me run npm start. Let me spin up the front end. Locally on my computer, I don't have that variable. I don't have a value for that environment variable. So when I spin up this, card is 0 because there is no backend. That environment variable doesn't have a value being passed into it. So this right here, that is only valid on Heroku because we went into Heroku and we added that environment variable into the admin panel there. To set this environment variable locally, To set this environment variable locally, you would create a .m file in your front end. So this says what the definition of these environment variables are on your computer. So go into whatever folder you have, create a .env file. And in here, you can create all of the environment variables that you want. So if you had something like my name equals Nathan, or in our case, we have this React app backend URL. So here in this M file, we can set our backend URL to whatever we test or whatever we run our Node.js app on. So this is the environment file for running your code on your machine. This is the value that's going to go into that variable in app.js when you're not running your code on Heroku, when you're doing local development, when you're doing local testing. I went pretty fast and I threw out a lot of stuff at you guys. Questions? Does this make sense? So this is in the slides if you want to check it out. How to. So I'm just going to throw out there that environment variables are a little weird because we're setting environment variables on Heroku. They're not going to be present on our computer. So there's different ways of getting environment variables into each location. It's going to just take some practice to get used to these.
Then how do you tell it which one to connect to if you've got both of those in there?
So here's how you should think about it. When you're running on your computer, so you go into your app and you run npm start, it's going to look in the .m file. Whatever's in there is going to take precedence. When you deploy so you do your git push Heroku main. When you push something to Heroku, that code's then going to look in Heroku for environment variable files. So .env is for you locally. That takes precedence over everything. When it's deployed to Heroku, it's going to look at the Heroku environment variables, which again are the things that are defined here in this settings page under config vars. So by adding this environment variable, we're able to change what the front end is talking to in different scenarios. So if we're working locally, we can have it talk to our localhost 8000. If we're working locally, we can also have it talk to our deployed backend. We go into our .m file and we change the URL from localhost 3000 where our node server is running, we can update it to talk to the deployed backend. So now we can develop on our front end against the deployed backend without even having to set up Node on our computer if we wanted. So you now have a little bit of flexibility in terms of when you're developing, if you're going to do it all locally on your computer or if you're going to test against something that's already deployed. Does that make sense? Okay. We are long overdue for a break, so let's go ahead and take a 10-minute and come back at 7:47.
And Nathan, you said we can go in and we can delete or just write over the existing apps we have in Heroku. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the other thing to be aware of is if your app was set up with that build pack for the create React app, do you remember that command we ran to, when we were deploying the front end, we created a build pack and it was like this Mars. If you deploy a Node app to something that has that create React app build pack, that will cause problems. So don't try to deploy your backend into an app that was created for your front end, and vice versa. Don't try to deploy your front end into an app that was configured to run backend apps. With the caveat that you totally can do what I'm saying, as long as you go into Heroku, into settings, and where it has these build packs down here. So this, mine doesn't have, I didn't set this up to, let's go take a look at one that does. So here's a create React app one. If you wanted to deploy a backend into this app, you would go in here, clear out whatever build pack is there, and then deploy. You need this create React app build pack if you're going to deploy a create React app. So if you try to throw a Node.js into it, it's going to look at this build pack and go, I have no idea what to do with a Node.js app. So honestly, I wouldn't even try to come in here and delete build packs. It's so easy to make a new app on Heroku that I would just go that direction. Okay. All right, let's finish up really quick. So we just got done talking through the environment variables. Again, you feel free to use them in your capstone. It would be really nice if you guys added a environment variable to the front end so you could configure it to work both locally and when it's deployed to Heroku. But you absolutely don't have to do that for your capstone. If you just want to put the string and the URL to your backend that's deployed on Heroku, you want to put that and hard code it into your app, your front end, by all means. But some tips I have for you after going through all of that stuff. It might be really tempting to test your front end against a deployed backend. I know I do it a lot because sometimes it takes a bit of work to go and set up your Node backend, make sure you've got a local database and all that stuff is there. Sometimes it could be really tempting to just be like, I'm just working on the front end, so all I'm going to do is point it at a deployed copy of the backend and do my development that way. It's very tempting to do that, and in some situations it makes a lot of sense, but just be careful with it because you never really know what version of the backend is currently running, as opposed to when you're running it locally, you know what code is in that backend. So say you're testing a new feature. In that case, the feature may not exist on the deployed version of the backend. So just be careful when you're taking, I'll call it a shortcut, when you're taking this shortcut and you're just testing directly against a backend without running it locally yourself. Okay. And then these environment variables can get really confusing. And when you go and start at your new jobs, you're going to download some code, you're going to start working on some code, and I promise you that code will have environment variables. And hopefully the people that created those environment variables will have left you some documentation. But if they didn't, it's going to be a little hard to understand how those environment variables are being used. For example, if we go back here to this environment variable we created, this React app backend URL, if you didn't have this example already there, how would you know what this variable was supposed to hold? How would you know what a React app backend URL is.
Run a search
So-
on all the files to see where it is in the code.
That's what you would have to do, is you'd have to go and look for where it's being used and try to infer, okay, Axios takes a URL. What this person is doing is they're taking some variable and they're adding the words items to it. So you would have to do that digging and try to infer how that variable is being used and what it means. As professional programmers, we can do better. So what I see most people doing is they will go into their documentation, so like their README, and just create a section. And you can get real fancy with this, but you can also be really simple. So just make something called like environment variables and just say, you know, let's go back to end. So we have this environment variable in our app. It's used to target the URL of a backend server. And then you might be so kind as to give an example of what one of these might be. So I'm going to give the example URL for the backend that's deployed on Heroku. So example. Here is an example of what that variable could hold. Okay. All right, that's it for tonight. So for the homework, what I'd like everyone to do is to deploy their backend to Heroku. If you need Postgres, also set up Postgres. Again, there's no pressure here. This is all due at the very end of the week. So you guys have more than enough time to start working on this. And then if you run into any problems, feel free to ask questions in class or send me a message. The homework is currently up on Google Classroom for you to take a look at. That is all I have. Any questions?
What are we doing for the next 2 days?
Well, I was going to ask. So we have a couple things to finish up here. We have obviously the domain name. We need to get wired up to Heroku. There's some additional DevOps stuff that I want to talk about, just kind of best practices, not necessarily homework that I have prepared for you, but just more general DevOps knowledge I'd like to share. I did want to throw out there that at the end of this week, I really want folks to have their capstones deployed and have a good, solid grasp on it. I was wondering, would you guys be interested in, instead of all of us piling into office hours on Saturday, would you guys be interested in using one of the next 2 days to just work on deploying all of our things? Just have like a dedicated day to work on it.
Sure. Hey,
Go ahead.
do you do like one-on-ones?
Absolutely. Yeah. If anybody needs anything, I'm always available to answer
How can we
questions.
contact you? Is it through Slack or is it through like email or
Whatever. Slack works. Probably Slack is the easiest way to get hold of me.
You're not
Okay.
on the mentors page?
Calendly?
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't have
Oh,
that
okay.
stuff.
Okay.
All right, we'll use Slack then.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, if that sounds good to you guys, I'd like to have a day for people to be able to ask questions. Like we covered a lot of stuff, and it's if you get something wrong, the whole thing can come to a grinding halt. So if you guys are okay with using one of our classes to just focus on our capstone, and I can go around and answer people's questions as they run into things, I think that would be useful. There's more stuff that I could show you guys. I just don't know how relevant it will be, because one of the tricky things is when you guys get your job, like and you're working professionally writing code and all that, every company is different. So the things that I show you here need to be transferable. And a lot of the DevOps stuff, how you deploy things, what kinds of tools you use, every company does slightly different. So we can go even more deeper into Heroku, but the chances of your company that you end up working for using Heroku, I don't know. I'd say it's probably slim, but okay.
I have
So
a couple.
yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, that create table if not exists that you did in SQL. Is there a way to do that in SQLize, or you just make like an if, like a conditional statement with, in JavaScript or something like that? Because I was trying to look it up and I didn't see anything.
Good question. How many folks are using the ORM? Because I know Kyle is. How many other people are using ORM? Oh, wow. Really? Man, okay. I thought more people were just using the raw PG stuff.
I thought that wasn't that safe because somebody could mess with your database by, I forgot what the word is, but they can put code in there to drop your tables and stuff like that.
Yeah, SQL injection, totally.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I guess Max cover that in his model?
Yeah,
Dude.
yeah. And then I was asking about like, what would you do if you wanted to use SQL? And he showed us like a link to something, but yeah, pretty much it seems easier to use SQLize.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with SQLize. I'm just looking to see if they have a create if not exists. I see a bug where they're saying that they don't support it. So they have a find or create, but that's for the road. It's not for the table. Let's see. Well, I don't know. I will, Kyle, I'll look up and see if I can find out how to do it in SQLize. I think there is a way to do it. But
Could you do
nothing...
like find one, like try to find the table and then say if exclamation point table, that type of a thing?
Yeah, exactly. You could run the, this is a little nasty, but you could run the create, and if it's already created, it will throw an exception. And you could handle that exception and then just ignore the exception.
The opposite, like look for the table first, and then if it didn't exist, run the create table. I forgot how to do it in SQLize, but yeah.
Yeah, that would work. If there's a way with SQLize to do the if not exist, it's much cleaner, but I don't know. I'll take a look though. There's nothing stopping you from using PG in combination with SQLize. So if you wanted to use PG to issue the create if not exist and then continue using SQLize, you could also go that route.
Okay, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Okay, that's a good idea. And then the other thing is the stuff you taught us last night, does that replace the npm build command in the React app? Or I forgot exactly what the command is, but
npm deploy?
Yeah, I just remember from like when we do create React app and it gives you a bunch of information and it says something about build, and we were told not to run that right away because that's when you're deploying. So I was under the impression that you had to do that before you deployed, but we didn't do that last night.
Nope, we didn't do it. And the reason why is because that build pack does the build for you. So that's one of the things that Mars create React app build pack will do is when you say git push Heroku main, what we use to do the deploys, when you run that command, it kicks off the build pack, and the build pack will, behind the scenes, yes, it'll run npm run build.
Okay.
So far, I don't know of a reason why you would need to run npm build, unless you were doing something where like you wanted to post to like your GitHub pages, then maybe you would have to run npm build and follow whatever those instructions are. But for our stuff, no, we don't need to run npm build. Other questions about the stuff we covered? We covered a whole bunch. Lots
I
of
had a
general.
question about
Go ahead.
the changes we made to the front end to connect it when we did the Axios,
Mhm.
because I was trying to follow along, and then I pushed the changes up to the GitHub and stuff even, but it still
Nice.
shows the original web store with the items that I deleted from the top.
Do you want to share your screen?
I'm
Oh,
on
no.
a different device. But I just was wondering if you could show that again, what you changed. You added the items and set items with the use state. You added the Axios with the get and the link to the store and items with the response and response.data.items, right?
Yep, exactly. So here's the code we called axios.get. Here's a really quick way to test and see if you've got everything configured correctly. So if you've got the code good there, did you create the
I missed
.env
this.
file?
I just realized I missed the set items. So if you go back, I think that must be my problem, because I was going too fast. So set items, something. But there was nothing else in the code that you changed.
In this code, I also imported the runtime env. Do you have that as well?
No, I do not. That would probably be the other thing.
And to get this package, you'd have to do an npm install in your app. So here's the instructions for installing that library. But once you have it, you could create this env object from the library, and then you can call whatever environment variables you want to declare for your app.
So if I didn't use the replacement key like you, I can just leave it with the original site and I don't need to add the runtime. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't want to use the environment variables, if that's not that it's too complex, but if you don't need that functionality, you can just paste in whatever the backend is. So in my case, my backend is deployed here, so I'll take that. Go back to
that's what I have, Brielle's web store. So I just wanted to double check. So those must be, let me try. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yep, you don't need any of this if you're not going to do environment variables. In fact, for your capstone, I would probably start off without having the environment variables and then work towards adding them if you need them. And honestly, you'll know when you need them because you'll be in here changing this string when you want to test the deployed backend, when you wanted to test your local. Eventually, you'll get tired enough and hopefully you'll remember the environment variables that we covered and come back in here and add those.
So once you've deployed your backend, and if you have people using it, you might have, depending on what you have going on with your backend and with your database, you might have people adding stuff to your database, right? So I'm just wondering if there would be a circumstance where you would want to be doing something locally, but then that's not going to be the same data that's in your real database anymore. So would you want to like download your database and have a local copy that was more accurate at some point, or would you just be using the online database that way?
That's a good point. It's definitely getting into more of the advanced territory. So let's say that you're running a community website and people sign up with their usernames and emails. Would it be nice to have a copy of that data locally? Yes. Would it be a security issue? Maybe. Once you have copies of production data floating around on laptops, that starts to get a little scary. And we've already kind of talked about that a little bit. It's part of the reason why we don't use our MacBooks to run all of our code is because, when we're developing, we're installing all sorts of software and that can be a security issue. Can be. Now, is it super helpful to have that data and really nice? Totally. One strategy that I see a lot of folks doing is they'll take the data that's stored in their database, anonymize it, and then use it as their local development data. Requires building this whole deal that can take your database and anonymize the sensitive things like people's emails, maybe their home addresses, that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, is it a good idea? No. Have people done it? Totally. If you don't have sensitive stuff in your database, by all means, grab copies of it and use it for your local development. That's a good question. Yeah. Other questions? Okay.
But other than I still don't have my backend working or my database working. I mean,
No worries. You just jump straight ahead to your capstone. Don't worry about setting up my cruddy little web store.
okay.
Your
so
your capstone is much more important than working through my example.
I am curious because I was trying to do the other like when you were connecting to the database through the terminal, I tried to follow along with that a little bit, and it looks to me like I was able to connect, like the database is there, but it just can't find items. But I don't know if I'm reading it right.
You wouldn't have found items, and the reason why is because your app needed to successfully deploy in order for it to run the create table if not exists.
Okay.
So when the app starts up, it provisions that table when it first runs. That gives more evidence to the fact that maybe you're like something was just going really wrong because the node app never even ran one time.
Okay, so the
provision
database
that
is
table.
there, but the app hasn't created the table. That makes sense.
Yep.
So theoretically, if I create the table in the terminal using SQL, then it would work. Okay.
I don't think so. It sounds like something's really wrong with that backend. I don't know.
Well, not the back end. I just meant the SQL commands. Yeah.
Yeah, the SQL commands would work. Definitely keep me posted because if your capstone, you run into any issues deploying that, then obviously that's a red flag and we'll. Any other questions? We got 21 minutes left. Can give that back to you folks. If you've got anything else, we can talk about that.
Hi, Nathan. This chef. One
Hey,
of
Sean.
those questions. Do you want to help with GitHub?
Oh yeah, GitHub. Yeah. How many people have pushed their capstone to GitHub? At least at one point in this last couple of weeks. Push their latest. Look at all of you. Yes. Now we're going to pick on Shaw because Shaw hasn't done it, and unfortunately we lost that. But you recovered lots of data. So let's go. Shaw, do you want to share your screen? We're going to go through really quick how to push up data to. Oh, I'll stop.
Sure. Pushing my capstone to GitHub, I think it was a few months ago. It was back in April. So
okay, so you've done it.
GitHub, but the where is my documents? So this is my capstone, the updated one. It's in my document.
Can you get there in a terminal?
Yeah, sure.
Shaw, is your documents synced with iCloud?
No.
Okay, dang. So you're in. So do a PWD, see where you're at. All right. So CD up a level. Okay, now CD into documents. All right. CD into capstone. All All right. So do a git status here. Let's see if we got a valid GitHub repo. Git status. Cool, we do. Whoa, wait. Whoa, okay. We have a, whoa. I think I know what happened. You have a Git repo that spans all of your hard drive.
Oh, wow.
And something happened.
How?
I don't know. So we got to be really careful here. So CD up 2 levels. CD up one more level. Okay. For folks that have other things to do, we're gonna try to unpack this mystery on Shaw's hard drive. Feel free to drop if you don't have any other questions, or if you have questions, leave them in chat and I'll get to them. Okay. This is where it's saying the GitHub repo is at. So do git status here. All right. Okay. Have you used the program cat before?
No.
So say cat in the terminal.
CAT?
Yep, cat. It takes one argument, which is the name of the file. I want you to cat.git and a space between the cat and the .git. Cat takes an argument, which is the name of the .git / start typing out config and see if tab completes it. Okay, yep. All right, so we have a GitHub repo that is connected to GitHub-API-test. Do you recall setting up that repo?
Yes, I do, but I don't need it. I can delete it.
Don't delete it. This is your hard drive. If you go to GitHub API test in GitHub, what's in here? Nothing. Click on the main icon over on the left, that little drop down for main. Do you have any branches? No. Okay, got it. All right, let's go back to the terminal. I want you to do a git log. Yep.
Enter.
Yep. Okay, so we have a first commit back in May. This is pretty old. Okay. RM, don't hit enter. RM-rf space .git.
Enter.
I'm just thinking really quick. Yes, hit enter. Yeah, this is where your files went. I know for sure this is where your files went. Okay, do a git status. Okay, you're not in the Git repository anymore. Cool. Okay, now we can go back down into your capstone and get that stored into a GitHub repo. Man, that was weird. We've cracked the mystery though, Shaw.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so CD into documents, into the capstone file or folder. Okay, do a git status here. Let's see if this is hooked up to a Git repo. It's not. Okay. So do you have a repo that you want to put this stuff into?
No.
Okay, let's go ahead and create one then.
I'll quickly look.
Hit the plus, or that works too, yeah. And hit new up in the top.
Can I name it capstone?
Sure. Oh, that'd be perfect. Okay, don't click any of the 3 things below. Just hit create repository.
Private is fine.
It's completely up to you. Private makes sense to me.
If I choose public, can I convert it to private later?
Totally, and vice versa. You can go from private to public as well. All right, so we need to do these instructions. Wait. Stay here. So open up the terminal and keep this window open on the side. All right. So we're going to follow the commands that it has there at the front. Right, do git init. This is going to initialize a brand. Yep, hit enter. Okay. Now do a git status. So you've got hit enter. So now you've got this set up. Go ahead and let's add some stuff so Git starts tracking it. So do a git add on, we're gonna need to add some files. So git add. Actually, before we do this, back up. Open up a new file called .gitignore.
Where?
Right here. So make a file called .gitignore.
In terminal?
Yeah, we could do it in the terminal. To make a new file in the terminal, you would say touch, and then the name of the file, so .gitignore. Lowercase I. Okay, hit enter. So that created a brand new .gitignore file. Go ahead and open that up with code. So how have you been opening up? Yeah, that works. Yep, open this up.
The whole folder?
A whole folder, yep. Okay, then open that .gitignore.
Where is .gitignore?
That is the one inside the backend folder. Click on the .gitignore below, the one in the main folder. Okay, in here, let's put some stuff that we don't want Git to track. So we don't want it to track the .vscode folder because that's just a file or a folder that your editor makes. So yeah, let's add .vscode in there. Okay, and then on the next line, let's add, that should be enough. Well, let's add that .ds_store because we don't need that in. Perfect, then save. Okay, now go back into the terminal and say git add dot. Just the, yep, and then a space between the add and the dot. So git add dot will add everything that's in that current folder. So Shaw, if you will put a space between the add and the dot. Okay, hit enter. So it's looking through all your files, it's adding them. Now do a git status. Cool, so now you've got all of these changes ready to go. Go ahead and make a commit. So git commit -am, git commit space -am. And then in here, put in a string describing what you're adding. So like open quotations, yeah, like adding my capstone or. Okay, hit enter. Okay, so now you've bundled all of those changes into a commit. It's on your computer, but it's not on GitHub yet. So let's go and follow the rest of the instructions over on the right. So do a git branch capital M, yep, main, yep. And then copy paste that whole remote add deal and just run that.
All the way down?
Yep, just copy all that and paste it into the terminal. Hit enter. Perfect. Yep. Now do the git push -u origin main. Okay, and then here, go ahead and enter in what you use to log into github.com. So your username is Shaw Upstate Hack. Okay, enter. And then whatever your password is for logging into GitHub.
Oh, it works.
Cool, now if you refresh that page over on the right, your stuff will be there.
Awesome, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. That was
Wonderful, thank you.
an interesting one to,
Thank
man.
you so much. Yeah.
Other folks have Git challenges they want to throw my way?
I actually do have a Git challenge, but I'm on the
Yes.
wrong device for it. Maybe I'll bring it on Thursday. But I have my front end backed up on GitHub, and I don't have my back end because I accidentally created a README file. And so then it didn't like that because it already had a README file. And then I tried to delete it, and it isn't letting me fetch the data because it's not connecting. And so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, it's fighting you.
Yeah. Yes. So it's probably not something too difficult to fix if you know how.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay. I will bring
This-
that on Thursday. I'll make sure I'm on my other device.
See, this is one of those things that I think would be cool to teach earlier on in the classes, because the rest of the modules you guys could be working and like flexing those muscles with Git. So when you hit something like this, yeah, you because I'll tell you what, Git will throw you some weird curveballs, especially when two people have edited the same file but in slightly different ways. Then you get into this territory where you've got to resolve what both of you wrote. It's fun.
But it's how a lot of businesses work, right?
Exactly. That's probably the most realistic thing that you'll see is, as developers, we all communicate through Git. That's how we share code. That's how we share files. That's how we share changes. So totally, yeah. Every company every software company is going to be running some form of version control. Most of them will be running Git. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? We've got 5 minutes left.
I was just wondering if I should move my front end into a repo all by itself if I have other folders in there that I don't want to deploy in the same repo as my React front end.
Oh,
I mean, the other folders aren't in React. They're just JavaScript and HTML.
yeah, if they're not inside your Create React app, they're not going to get deployed.
Okay, so I won't bother with that. Good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you should be good. Yeah, for Create React app, it has to be either in the JavaScript, imported by the JavaScript, or in the public folder. If it's in none of those, then yeah, it won't. Cool. Okay, let's call it. So the homework is up. Take a look at it whenever you want. Let's bank on one of these 2 days. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow or if we want to do it on Thursday. I'll figure that out. But we'll just have a working session for our capstones. And then for office hours, if we do a working session during the week for office hours, we can talk about other fun stuff instead of everybody stressing about their capstones. So cool. Well, I'm really excited to have a day to just check out all of yours, all your capstones. So anyways, I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your evening and best of luck. All right, good night.